Welcome to the CARES Board Annual Community Meeting. My name is Steve Malone. I'm the CARES Board President, and as you heard Lisa just well, she's our CARES Board Coordinator. So we are today going to have a community meeting on houselessness and supportive housing options here in Monroe County. We have distinguished guests from Beacon Incorporated, Centerstone, and Heading Home of South Central Indiana. I will give each of them the opportunity to introduce themselves here in just a little bit, and Lisa will be our moderator in case there's any questions, answers, or anything of that sort. As she said, you can put them in the chat. But again, thank you all, and thank you for our panelists for being here. I truly appreciate it, your willingness to sit and discuss this, because I think this is a pretty major issue here in our county, and people need to be aware of what they have available for homelessness and supportive housing. So before we get to the panels themselves, I just want to let everybody know that the Monroe County CARES is a local coordinating council of the Governor's Commission for a Drug-Free Indiana, established to coordinate, support, and promote local efforts to prevent and reduce harmful involvement with alcohol and other drugs here in Monroe County. Again, I'm the CARES Board President. We just recently released our application for 2023 and 2024. If you are interested in applying for funds and have not before, please email Lisa for the application. It's a fillable form, and we would love to have you apply for this grant application. I know it was sent out a little later than we had anticipated, and but it's a fairly easy application to take care of. The submission deadline is April 16th at 5 p.m. and you would submit those applications to Lisa Muser, and then we as the board will vote on those later down the road, I think sometime in May, and disperse funds at a later date. And Lisa just put her email in chat if you're interested in it. So with that, again, thank you all for coming. I'm going to just allow you all to briefly introduce yourself and let you know where you're from. And then Lisa, if you want to take over after that, as far as who wants to start first, that's fine. I'll go by what I have on my screen first. I have Forrest from Beacon House on here. Forrest, you want to introduce yourself real quick?
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm the Executive Director of Beacon, and I'm glad to be with you all.
Thank you. Danielle, I got you next.
Hi, I'm Danielle Sorden. I'm the Director of Housing First Programs. I manage the Crawford program, and I'm the Coordinated Entry Lead for Region 10 in Indiana. Awesome.
Thank you. Mary, I got you next.
Hi, everyone. I'm with Heading Home of South Central Indiana. It's a relatively new organization that's hopefully providing a backbone for the direct line services folks to make homelessness rare, brief, and not repeating.
Thank you, Mary. Dan.
Good afternoon. My name is Dan McNeely. I'm the Director of Supportive Housing Services at Centerstone, and we've got several programs, including permanent supportive housing at Kinzer Flats.
Thank you. And I know I called him James, but he goes by JT more often than James. So JT, I'll let you go next.
Thank you, Steve. Hi, everybody. I'm JT Freeze. I'm the Assistant Director of Supportive Housing at Centerstone, and it's nice to be here. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. Lisa, it's all yours now if you want to take over from here as far as how you want to rock and roll with this.
I don't really have an agenda for all of you panelists, except that we're really excited to hear from you about what you're offering in the community. I might maybe have Danielle, you could start if you wanted, because I know that you are coordinating efforts that include all of these panelists. So would that be okay for you to speak on behalf of that coordination that's happening? And then Forrest might want to speak particularly with regards to what Beacon is doing programming wise. Does that sound okay, Danielle?
Sure.
Great, thanks a lot.
As the Coordinated Entry Lead, I try to coordinate the agencies in the 5-county region. All of the shelters and street outreach and people who receive homelessness funding from HUD use the same vulnerability assessment to gauge what type of housing program a person should be directed toward. All of those names go on the same list. And then all of the housing programs that receive funding from HUD or from the state pull the referrals from that same list. That way we ensure that the most vulnerable person in the community gets the next housing opportunity, as long as they're the person who's eligible for that housing opportunity. So that's probably the most basic way I can boil that down.
Okay, great, thanks. If I'm gonna let you all self-select how you want to jump in. I'm not gonna tell you what order to go in, so whenever that you as a panelist are ready to share what your organization's doing with regards to this, you can just unmute yourself and share with us what you have going on.
I'll hop on since I'm the new kid on the block, and have been learning a lot from all of the panelists. So I'm sure that many people on this call were involved in developing what's called the Heading Home Plan. It was a strategic plan that was put together really over the course of the year by a group that was convened by the Community Foundation of Bloomington and Monroe County, and the United Way of Monroe County, the City of Bloomington and Monroe County Government, South Central Housing Network, and several other groups. And really the idea was to create a roadmap for the entire community and the region to address housing insecurity. It coincided with the availability of some federal funds that could support staff to actually help implement the plan. And so that's what I was hired to do about a year ago. And working with me is Tatiana Wheeler, who is also on this call. And so we have been really just trying to identify gaps and support the work that's already being done. We have, I'll put in our chat our website, which gives you some more information about our work, but I guess I'd just like to highlight a couple of things. We helped this region join a national organization called Built for Zero. You may have heard of that. They're working with over 100 communities across the country to reduce homelessness. We're the first group in Indiana to be part of that. And two of the panelists on this call, Danielle and Forrest, are part of our core Built for Zero team. Built for Zero is really providing a framework for us to learn from other communities and take a more data-driven approach to addressing housing insecurity and homelessness. And I guess one of the most recent examples that I think is pretty exciting, and Forrest and Danielle might speak to this too, is the formation of a veteran case conferencing group that meets every other week. And the idea is it's a multi-agency effort to really just problem solve how we can move veterans who are homeless into housing as quickly as possible. Since January, we've, and I say we, but it's really this collective group, has moved 12 veterans into housing. And I think that's really remarkable. And I'm hoping that that approach serves as a model for attacking other kind of subpopulations of people experiencing homelessness. So I will stop there and just say that I'm really excited to see some people that we've worked with, but also to see a lot of people that I don't know, and I'm hoping to learn about what you all do as well in the future. Thanks.
Thank you, Mary.
I'm happy to jump in, I guess, here. I think as we think about our theme here, it's important to start with basics. And I think the most important thing to think about right now is that, at least to start us off, is to recognize that there are somewhere between 300 and 350 people experiencing homelessness on the streets right now, in shelters, living in cars, living in abandoned buildings, living outside right now in this very moment in our community. And that's important. That's ultimately what we're here for, is really just to remember those folks and acknowledge those folks and recognize that that this is a condition in our society that has to end. That it's intolerable that people live in these conditions, and that we allow that as a society, and we have to address that and deal with that very seriously. About 10 to 15% of those folks who are homeless due to severe disabilities, and have often been homeless for a year or more, sometimes decades. And that's a specific subpopulation of homelessness that we call chronically homeless. And those folks, I think it's also important to know, they often have pretty severe health conditions, often something we call trimorbidity, where they have a severe substance use disorder, they have a severe mental illness, and they have some kind of chronic illness or physical disability. And all three of those things combined, when people have all three of those things combined, it's particularly lethal. The average age of death for a chronically homeless person is 47 years old. And so their needs and concerns are particularly high and particularly strong and particularly challenging. And we also know that, generally speaking, when the community thinks of a person experiencing homelessness, often who they think of is a chronically homeless person. That's the person you might see panhandling on the street corner. That's a person you might see, out and about. That might be the person you're seeing that's having a mental health episode that's scary. That's a person that you might see that has a drug problem that you suddenly witness, out in the community or something like that. It could be a person that just collapsed on the sidewalk. These are folks that tend to be very public, and so being very public and having such high health conditions and high serious challenges, they need pretty significant interventions to support them and help end their homelessness and improve their health and improve their lives and their quality of life. And that's where permanent supportive housing comes in. That's where a housing first approach comes in. That's where supportive housing comes in. It's a proven method. It's not a cure-all, but it's incredibly valuable and important in helping people in that state, particularly of chronic homelessness, end their homelessness and improve their quality of life. And we know some pretty amazing things from that, but among the things we know is that within a year to 2 years, it drastically improves people's health conditions. So they don't, again, I don't want to present this as a cure-all, because people still have challenges and still have problems when they get housing and support. They still have a lot of challenges and problems when they still get support. But we see that their improvement in their health is so significant that it's just marked to know. It's really, really astonishing to see how important that is. But we also see something that's really pretty important to our community, I think, and a lot of complaints about homelessness is related to crime and related to things like trespassing and petty theft and public intoxication and disorderly conduct and things like that. The what I tend to call nuisance crimes that can be associated with some people experiencing homelessness. And one of the things we see in a permanent supportive housing model is that the amount of arrests in those folks drops 80 to 90% within a year to 18 months. And I don't know a single more effective crime prevention strategy than that in terms of our community and their benefits. So Housing First is, and permanent supportive housing is not only an incredibly beneficial program for the people who need it, it also benefits the community as a whole. So I hate to be cliche, but it's win-win for everybody. And that's why it's such an important model. And I'll stop there and pass this to Dan or JT.
Thank you, Forrest. I just wanted to add that I think one of the things about homelessness in Bloomington and homelessness in general is that, excuse me, very rarely is it a simple solution or a simple cause. There are many factors that go into an individual experiencing homelessness, and then there are many factors that are going to be needed to get someone exited out of homelessness and into permanent supportive housing or transitional housing or wherever they may end up. And it does take a lot of efforts from the community. As Danielle mentioned, she's the head of our coordinated entry. And when we have our biweekly meetings for that, we have agencies from all across this community and other communities that are really collaborating to try to help the situations that these folks are in. And it really does take the entire community to do that.
Thank you, JT.
Permanent supportive housing is something that Centerstone has worked with others in the community to implement for a number of years. And we've got 3 different permanent supportive housing programs and a couple other housing or homelessness funded facilities. Kinzer Flats, our newest one, it's the 60 unit or 50 unit apartment building for people with a substance use disorder and who are experiencing homelessness. And then we've got the Limestone Project, which is a 10-bed scattered site, and Bloomington Permanent Supportive Housing, which is another 10-bed scattered site.
Thanks, Dan. If folks that already spoke haven't named the supportive housing that you have within your organization, would you mind just naming that for the public so that the public knows what your organization is offering the community with regard to supportive housing?
Danielle did allude to this, but Beacon operates Crawford Homes, which is a 110 units of permanent supportive housing, both in what we call site-based, and those are in Crawford Apartments and Crawford 2 Apartments. Some of you are familiar with that. And then what we call scattered sites. So those are with existing landlords throughout the community. So I think we have, if my memory serves me right, I think we have 61 units in Crawford 1 and Crawford 2 total, and then the remaining, sorry, math, doing it really quickly, 49 are scattered site units throughout the community.
Thank you. Did everyone else name the specific supportive housing components within their organization? Yeah, okay, great. I do have a question coming in. And this is for JT specifically. There's a question I think for you to just say more, JT. Can you please be more specific when you say it really takes the entire community? We want to know more about that if you'd be willing to share. And that question can go to other folks too after.
Sure thing. As kind of piggybacking off what Forrest said, individuals that are experiencing homelessness often have mental health, they have substance abuse needs, they have physical health needs, and no one agency is going to be able to address everything from healthcare to childcare to employment services. And so if we really want to give individuals experiencing homelessness a chance to improve their situations, it's going to take sectors from all over our community to come together to work to a solution on that.
And I would add that I think it takes not just the people who are providing direct services, but it takes engagement with really the entire, all parts of the community. So faith-based organizations, the business community, government entities. I don't think that we can address this problem effectively by putting all of the burden on the nonprofits who are providing the services. We really need to have a better educated public to understand the complexities of the problem. We need a regional approach because there are a lot of services in Bloomington that aren't available in the surrounding counties. We need those counties to engage and to understand what their needs are and how they can address their needs, so that residents from, Lawrence County or Greene County don't have to relocate to Monroe County in order to get the services that they need. So it really needs to be a multi-pronged and really broad approach. And that's one of the things that Heading Home was created to help do.
I'd like to add something a little kind of along that question, which is it does take all partners, and it also takes a community kind of acting in for lack of better words, a coordinated way. And that can be difficult when you have lots of different partners that have different philosophies and different agendas and different approaches and different hopes. And one of the things that I think as we move along and grow in our ability to look at how to be better at the work we do is recognizing that sometimes the way we approach our services makes a huge difference in the impact on people. And for a good portion of, for like 100 years or more, homeless services were very much driven by the mission movement. And the mission movement saw homelessness services as very specific. It was about changing the person while they were homeless. It was about this idea that this is a person who's homeless. Let's change this individual so that they become a better person while they're homeless. And then by changing them, then they resolve their homeless issue and they return to society in a more functional and effective way. And while there's merit in that, I think what we've seen over the years is that that tended to leave a permanent, if you will, underclass of people homeless forever until they died on the streets. That not everyone can meet that standard of what we think a perfect person is in our society, and so that there are more effective approaches to helping everyone get homeless. And so that's where the housing first approach came into being. And the idea of housing first is the idea that human beings, that there's nothing in their lives that isn't made better by having housing first. By bringing someone into housing and by supporting them in housing and then supporting them to continue to improve, their health and their lives and their needs while they're in housing, tends to be more effective and certainly more humane than the idea of trying to keep someone homeless indefinitely. And so that's somewhat of a philosophical difference that I think we're coming to understand more and more in terms of one works better than the other, that housing first actually works more effectively, that it's better in terms of its results and impact on people. And so that's one of the things why I think that's really important to understand as we talk about homelessness and housing first today, and permanent supportive housing is a big part of the permanent supportive housing model is about helping those people who are the most vulnerable, who never house themselves without support, that we help them into homes and then help them improve their lives from there.
Thanks, Forrest. There are a lot of questions coming in, so that's exciting, and I will answer those. I will speak those. Steve, I see you have your hand up. Did you want to say something?
Yes, please. I got a couple questions. Mary, kind of piggybacking on what you mentioned before, and I don't know if anybody has any of this information. Does anybody know the percentage of individuals that are homeless in Monroe County that are coming from outside Monroe County? Or is that just not something that you guys can track? No. I'm just curious as a resident here, are there a lot of, is it a high percentage, or are they all mainly Monroe County residents initially?
Yeah, we have guesses, but it's a very hard number to track. But it's probably somewhere in the range of 20 to 30% are from outside of our county. and had their last permanent residence outside of our county. And and most of those folks are from the counties, immediately around us, Greene, Morgan, Brown, Lawrence, et cetera, Owen. And and when people are generally, if they are out of state, for example, which does happen in a small number of people, they generally came here for a reason. They came to Bloomington because there often it was a potential relationship, or sometimes a job opportunity. Sometimes they have family here, and they're coming here hoping to reconnect with their family or make this burdening relationship work, or this job work. And those things don't work out, and so they end up homeless and on the streets. But we definitely see a significant number of people, not by any means the majority or even super majority, but we definitely see a significant number of people coming from out of county. And there's a clear reason for that, because most of our communities don't have anything, in the areas around us. If we look in terms of just significant shelters, in particular for single adults, we've got Terre Haute, we've got Indianapolis, we've got Jeffersonville, and a somewhat small one in Columbus, a little bit going on in Lawrence and Morgan. But you have these just vast areas of just space and land and rural communities that have basically nothing. So people are not necessarily coming to Bloomington because we have such great services, but are leaving their communities. They're fleeing their communities because they have nothing for them.
Because
I would add that
nothing
it's,
for 'em, right? Is that what you're saying? Because there's nothing for them in that area? Is that what you're saying, Reverend?
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. Most
Okay.
people would want, sorry, Mary, most people would want to stay in their home communities if they had that alternative. If they could survive in their home communities, they would want to.
and I was just going to add that I think the other challenge is that some of the leadership in those other communities aren't necessarily interested in doing a deep dive to see what the needs really are, and are probably in many cases quite happy to have the services elsewhere. Heading Home had convened a group of folks in Lawrence County last fall just to have a conversation about what the needs were. And we encountered some skepticism from some of the elected officials about whether there really were any significant number of people who are homeless or housing insecure. So we're partnering with Laura Littlepage, who's a professor at IU, and doing some research in Lawrence County to try to get some actual data on the needs there and the current situation. But I feel like there is a definite bias against, in some cases, having even the knowledge of what the reality on the ground is, because that might mean then, oh yeah, well, we actually do need services in other counties. So that's just a challenge to overcome.
Thank you both. A question that's coming in is, could the panelists discuss how people can access the supportive housing if they need it?
They can get assessed for a housing program at Shalom Community Center. We also, Centerstone and HealthNet have street outreach caseworkers that go to the parks and go to the camps. So they seek out people who are experiencing homelessness. I don't know that there's anyone at Centerstone that does.
Yes, we have several staff.
So if somebody walked into Centerstone and they asked to be assessed, they would be connected with someone?
It might not be able to be the same day, just because it would be street outreach folks who would be out in the street, but yes, we could make that happen.
Yeah, that's kind of what I meant. I know you guys
Yeah.
have street outreach people. I didn't know if there was anybody at the site that someone could walk in and see, like they do with the Shalom caseworkers. So they would just take a message and connect them that way. Okay. Also, New Hope for Families does the housing assessments, Wellspring Shelter, Middle Way House, Becky's Place in Bedford is now doing them. And I've been talking with the person who runs the warming shelter in Bedford about doing them as well. Manna Mission in Martinsville, they don't, well, they'll do them on paper and give them to us to put in the system. So basically, almost all of the shelters and our day center and the street outreach people all do the assessments to put someone on the coordinated entry list that may refer someone to permanent supportive housing, or it may refer them to rapid rehousing. That's the interesting thing about the vulnerability assessments, is that if you score high for vulnerability, you get put in the section that is eligible for a referral to permanent supportive housing. If you score low on the vulnerability assessment, then you are eligible for rapid rehousing. And that's because rapid rehousing is temporary. It's deposit assistance, help with a few months of rent, some temporary case management to help with budgeting and job search and that sort of thing. But it doesn't provide the ongoing support that permanent supportive housing does. So we only refer people with low vulnerability to rapid rehousing. And that's a nationwide system. That's not just our region, just so everybody's aware of these things that are going on with coordinated entry. That's a HUD requirement, meaning that in order to get federal funds, you have to be doing some sort of coordinated entry in your community.
Thank you, Danielle. There is a question about this question. Does STRIDE do housing assessments?
I don't think so. The last time that STRIDE had someone that they were trying to get in my program, I went there myself and did the vulnerability assessment.
Yeah, I do not believe that we have anyone that's trained to complete the assessment at that location, but we could connect them to those that could complete it, yes.
Okay, thank you. I'm just scrolling back up. Okay.
One of our biggest goals, sorry to butt in, but with Built for Zero, sorry, I'm blanking on the word, the initiative that Mary was talking about. One of our biggest goals is to get everyone assessed, whether we have a housing placement for them or not. We very, very strongly strive to get everybody assessed, to get everybody on the list.
This might be related. I think it's still a question that hasn't been answered. What is the process when the agencies get together to determine those most at risk? And I know you've talked a little bit about that, but is there more to say on that process?
We have a meeting every 2 weeks, and almost all the shelters and all of the housing programs attend that meeting, along with sometimes people from the police department, people from the VA, and various other agencies that might be that might have information that's important or relevant to the meeting. At that time, the people that have openings in their housing programs will try to find the most vulnerable person on the list who's eligible for their program. That means that the highest vulnerability person on the list may not be eligible for the program that has an opening. For instance, my program, you have to be chronically homeless. For Centerstone's Kinzer Flats, you don't have to be chronically homeless, but you do have to have a substance use disorder. So sometimes we go a little further down the list to find the appropriate person for that program. And that will be the person that's referred, but we discuss it with the caseworkers out on the street and in the shelters that are actually working with that person to make sure that there are no reasons why that person wouldn't be a good referral for that program. And then we also take advice from those on the ground workers to tell us if there's someone whose vulnerability isn't being reflected by the assessment. So oftentimes those are people who are elderly and have multiple physical health problems, which doesn't really reflect well on the vulnerability assessment. So if BPD comes to us and says, hey, I've met this lady, she's living outside, she doesn't have a tent, she won't go to the shelter, and this is a real example, I'm afraid I'm gonna find her frozen to the ground some morning, we will put that person at the top of the list, even if their score doesn't reflect it. So it's a very collaborative process with the different agencies. And we really try to take into account the recommendations of the people who actually know the people who are experiencing homelessness.
I'd agree with everything Danielle said, and the amount of collaboration that goes on in the coordinated entry meetings and sometimes outside of those meetings is really impressive. Not only just for identifying those that are most at risk, but also just kind of touching base on different cases, because a lot of the individuals experiencing homelessness are going to be getting bits and pieces of services from different agencies around the community. And so it's nice, you know, an outreach worker will say, I noticed this person at this location, and a shelter person can add, you know, I know they stayed here on this night. We need to track down this person so we can get them into their permanent supportive housing. So it really is different parts of the social services field coming together to try to get folks into the best position that they can.
Yeah, I mean, it's an hour-long meeting. We usually have 20, 24 people in the meeting, and we're spending an hour talking about half a dozen people at the most, really. So it's a very intensive process where we really try to make a very informed and careful decision about who gets each housing placement.
Thank you. This feels relevant too. How would one who has been told they aren't allowed in shelters connect for housing or connect for shelter?
It looks like Margaret answered that. Street outreach goes out, like I said, to the parks, to the camps, to the alleys. If they get alerted by the police department, if they find homeless people that are new to the community, you'd be surprised how quickly a new homeless person is reported to the police department in this community, especially if they're not sticking to the normal spots that we expect to find them. And street outreach goes and they find those people. They drive around looking for them. They ask around until they find them, and they do the assessments. So it's not impossible that the outreach is missing a couple people here and there. But like I said, our community makes every effort to find and assess everyone that's on the street.
Okay, great. Thank you. Just scrolling back up. Danielle, how does someone get referred to Crawford? Are pets allowed? What services are provided?
Same process. The coordinated entry, go to the shelters or talk to street outreach and do a housing assessment. Crawford, Kinzer Flats, Limestone, Bridges, we all pull our referrals off that same list. Pets are allowed if you have a letter from a healthcare provider that says it's an emotional support animal or a service animal, which actually makes it legally not a pet. It's a medical device at that point. I'm sorry, what was isn't there a third part?
It was what services are provided there at Crawford's house?
We have case management for everyone. The case managers try to make sure that everyone has whatever benefits they're eligible for, like Social Security disability benefits, food stamps. We 100% try to keep everyone on health insurance, help them get to doctor's appointments, court dates, whatever they have going on. We make sure they have food. So we have a once a week box of food giveaway, a food pantry here at Crawford. We also, the case managers will go to food pantries if people aren't getting enough food that way. We help them with, Monroe County Humane Association comes here once a month and does vaccinations and flea treatment and basic care for all the animals that live here. Sojourn House comes here and does a once a week support group for women. We have churches that come and do dinners. just various things, whatever I can line up.
That's great. Yeah. Okay, next question. Is there a good protocol for finding next of kin for those who are experiencing homelessness and it says and past, but I'm not sure what that means. I know from working the coroner's office part-time that this has been an issue in the past. I just wondered if there are lists of emergency contacts or next of kin somewhere.
I actually just pound this into the caseworkers to beg our clients for a next of kin contact. Since we take the most vulnerable people, we see more deaths than your average housing program would. I've had situations where we didn't have next of kin listed, and I've had to try to help the coroner figure out who they are, who their families are. Sometimes we have their birth certificates, their social security numbers, that kind of thing. Unfortunately, most of the people we work with, their ties to their families are severed because of the situation that they're in, or they wouldn't be in that situation. So we have to really, a lot of people just outright refuse to tell us who their next of kin is. But we try as hard as we can to get that information.
And with permanent supportive housing, sometimes people who entered the program years ago, even if they gave us next of kin, it's no longer, the contact numbers are gone. And so it's important for our staff to keep asking that. And I would imagine about half the time we get the information, but there are a lot of people who just don't want to give a contact.
Thank you. How many homeless youth are in Bloomington? Does supportive housing include youth or a parent and child? Is it specific to individual adults?
I can't speak to numbers. I know that it's not just single adults and it's not just adults. And we have, I think we've got 50 units at Kinzer Flats, and 12 of those are 2-bedroom family units, and all of them are full.
We have 10 units that are specifically for people with minor children in the household. All those are full. And usually, most of them have been full for many years, some of them 10 years. Once you house a family in permanent supportive housing, they pretty much stay housed. And then Wellspring in Martinsville has family units as well, permanent supportive housing. I forget how many. Forrest, do you remember? Maybe 12, maybe?
Yeah, I don't remember that
I was
number.
thinking around 10, yes.
In that ballpark, yeah.
Yeah.
Also, a lot of families get referred through coordinated entry to rapid rehousing. So a lot of families benefit from that resource. And sometimes those resources will combine, like we might combine them with a Section 8 voucher, a housing choice voucher. So rapid rehousing can help with some of the startup expenses like security deposits and sometimes moving costs, application fees, things like that. And then the Section 8 voucher might take over from there, but and sometimes the housing search process. So that's a lot of families end up with rapid rehousing, and there's a reason for that, because generally folks who continue to have access to their children, that they're a little more capable, for lack of better words, that their abilities are a little more able, and their disabilities and challenges aren't as severe, and so they're less likely to, if you're a family, that generally means you're more capable, often, not always, but often. But permanent supportive housing is often for folks, if they've had children, they sadly have often lost them.
To the system.
Exactly. Yeah.
Thank you. Next
I'll
question.
I'll also add just this one thing, which is there's this, I think sometimes when people don't know much about what's going on in the work that we're doing, that there's this kind of thought about everybody's operating in the silos, and all these nonprofits are not acting together and working together. And that's one of the things that's really powerful about what's going on with coordinated entry, and also with heading home, and what Mary talked about earlier in the veterans case conferencing. These are all examples, and there are more of agencies actively working together to partner with each other to help solve the problem. And while there's always opportunities to partner more and partner better, there's a lot of partnership going on amongst the different agencies, and that's something that I think is really special about our community. Maybe it's special in other communities too, but I think, again, you can always critique, like, do more with each other, but I do think that this community, for the most part, works really well together, and that's defying some of the myths about how we're siloed and things like that.
I did want to add one more thing about children and families. A lot of times, family reunification homelessness is a barrier to family reunification. So we've seen a number of people who moved into permanent supportive housing, and because of that, they're reunited with their kids.
That's great. Thanks, Dan. Some of this has already been answered, but if it hasn't been answered for your particular organization or offering, what services are put in place to help keep people housed once they get the supportive housing, and what could make them lose it?
Mostly in Housing First, you require them to be a good tenant and a good neighbor. Generally, the things that will make them lose their housing automatically would be some sort of violence in their community, or property destruction. We don't kick someone out for relapsing on drugs or alcohol, or for having behavioral issues that are caused by mental illness or untreated mental illness, unless they become a danger to themselves or to the property or to their neighbors or to the staff.
And we actively, we actively use, sorry, Danielle, I thought you were done there. So if you have more, you can. We actively use an eviction prevention approach, and so does all Housing First programs, at least at their best. And that means that eviction's never the first response to problematic, challenging behavior in their apartments, or in their complexes. So that's really important, that there's a whole service engagement that kind of like, really gets on it when someone is showing challenging issues or whatever, when they're severely damaging their property or hurting their neighbors, that kind of thing. That the community tries to really step in to prevent them from becoming homeless, which means working with them on what behaviors they're doing and trying to help them reverse it. And there's a lot. Housing stability, it's, we often talk about getting people housed, but keeping people housed, or housing stability, as we call it in the lingo, is actually really difficult. And that's a lot of the work. And when you think about a Housing First approach, it's not only moving people in, but housing stability becomes a really important feature of your work. Is how good are you? How successful are you at helping people stay in their homes and be successful in their homes?
And in terms of services, supportive services we offer for our tenants, that also is a community effort. It's not, none of us can do that alone. We need to pull in other folks, other organizations, and get help. And that's one of the benefits of talking frequently. We can pull that together.
And one thing I'd like to add, JT and I act as liaisons for our scattered site residents who have other landlords that aren't Centerstone and aren't Crawford. So working with landlords in the community who don't have the mission that we have can be very challenging. They have a lot less tolerance for issues with tenants. I just had someone evicted from a property because she let her boyfriend use her keys to come in the building. So we work with those landlords to negotiate and beg and plead for housing stability, not to mention for people to be approved in the first place with their background checks and their credit checks and all that stuff. So that's actually a big part of the work, is negotiating with landlords.
And finding landlords who will continue to work with you on an ongoing basis.
Yep.
Or new landlords when you have the opportunity to expand your programs, but don't have the physical buildings yourself. And I think that's something that hopefully our community can work towards as we progress, is just more private landlords that are open to partnering with service providers and those involved with coordinated entry, so that we can have the opportunity to house more individuals experiencing homelessness.
I'm on the board of the Bloomington Housing Authority, and we had our board meeting this weekend or this morning. And we had a pretty long conversation about this topic and the need for, more better landlord outreach and recruitment. Heading Home has partnered with BHA to develop a couple of videos. We interviewed some landlords who accept vouchers and support the program, and to talk about why they do that and what that means. And then talk to some tenants, and we'll have another video about the impact on their lives when they have the opportunity to have stable housing. So that's one example, but I think we need to do, as a community, as a region, more work to get those units to open, get those landlords to understand the importance of it and support the ones that do, so celebrate and support the ones that are good and that do understand the importance of accepting vouchers.
Yeah, and some of the programs give us some resources to help the landlord deal with the challenges of permanent supportive housing. And the biggest one is being able to provide case management to sort of work through issues before they become big issues.
I think this is like, we have units that we're having trouble filling because we're unable to find. So we literally have money to pay for people, and we don't have units for them. So there's some people that are still living homeless right now, people with disabilities living homeless right now, because we literally can't find places to help them move into. We actually have these vouchers available to us, and we're just struggling to find places. And I recently passed up on applying for a grant that I think we probably would have gotten if we could have applied for more housing units. And I chose not to apply for housing units on that particular grant because I didn't think we'd be able to find places that we could, help people be housed. So we're literally turning away resources in our community because we don't have sufficient housing for this population.
Yeah, the latest number that I've heard is that of all the vouchers that are available, only 60% are being used because people can't find places that will accept them.
And that's a scary statistic because we also know that there's only about, for every 10 people who qualify for a voucher nationally, only 2 get them. So not only are we having underutilization, but we have an undersupply for the need. So these are big challenges.
Thank you.
And that's stats housing choice voucher. Somebody just asked about Section 8. That's stats for Section 8 vouchers.
Thanks. I have a question on that, but I'm going to wait because there's a whole other question, a lot of questions coming in. For the panel, are you looking at communities that are doing this well? If so, what communities and what are the essential factors you see that factors you see there that are ensuring this success?
That's one of the things that we've been doing through Built for Zero. I think that one of the values of that initiative is that they work with so many different communities that are on kind of different phases of the journey towards getting to what's called functional zero for people experiencing homelessness. So the frameworks that they build are based on that experience. And then they are pretty regularly sending updates to our network about what other communities are doing. One thing that came to mind is I can't remember if it was Denver or someplace in Colorado that had really rallied their faith-based community to support the work that's being done in a coordinated way, so that as opposed to a church or synagogue or doing something alone, that they came together and heard from the homeless response network what the needs were, and then were coordinated in their efforts to support that work. So yeah, I think some other panels have noted this is we are not unique here in Southern Indiana. There are these problems to different degrees of magnitude in other communities all across the country, large and small.
A question came in that was posed to everyone, and I don't know if it was seen, but in your panelist experience, has there been an adherence to the Bloomington Human Rights Ordinance prohibiting discrimination based on housing status?
Is an interesting
Not by landlords.
Yeah, there's an interesting thing about that the human rights ordinance, and I'm certainly glad that status is in there. We worked hard to get it in there, but if a certain anti-discrimination category appears in a local ordinance, but it doesn't appear in the state ordinance, it means locally it's voluntary. That there's no teeth, there's no legislative teeth there's no punishment that's possible or anything like that. So the only thing that the city could do, for example, if someone was found to be violating that policy, would be to kind of write a nasty letter, and it's also incredibly difficult to determine whether somebody is using housing status as their factor for letting someone in or not. And so that's also a really challenging thing to even kind of prove, because they can say, oh, it's their credit history or their criminal background or whatever, the lack of income, and use those as the reason that they're making that choice, which are all legal reasons for making that choice.
Thank you. Question. I think now that 714 South Rogers is owned by the city on the former hospital site, could it be used as a shelter and apartments?
Is that the core building?
I actually don't know what I just know
That'd be the next block down. That's the old
714 on the
healthcare.
hospital.
Yeah.
I don't think any of us are aware of any plans by the city to specifically convert any of the properties into
I think it's the old
shelters
nursing home, by the way.
Yeah, I'm not aware of any plans to convert any of the properties on that site into shelters. And
I just heard a update from John Zodi of the city's hand department yesterday, talking about the city's plans for the Hopewell neighborhood, which is what they're calling that area. And the core building is, as Dan mentioned, is the only one that is going to be repurposed for low-income housing, and the Bloomington Housing Authority is partnering on that. And that would be like 40 units. It won't be a shelter. It won't be permanent supportive housing. It'll just be income restricted housing.
But 10 of the units would be set aside.
Oh, that's right.
for
With Stent, sorry.
disability. Yeah.
Yep, that's right. Forgot about that.
Okay, thank you. I have a long question. This person's looking for the best and safest place to refer or help elderly that have no idea where or what to do when being evicted due to the selling of rentals and raising rent beyond their fixed incomes so they can't afford. I get 70 to 90-year-olds that do not know where is a safe place is for them, usually women. They are worried about what will happen to them if they go to some places. What would anyone here recommend for this age group that are first-time homeless? I don't know where to send them if they have no family or friends due to their age. Most family friends seem to have passed on. They will stay in their car, but some no longer drive or have a car. I just want a safe place to suggest to them to go while trying to find other housing.
I mean, I think there's fear about the shelter services, but the shelter services are generally extremely safe. So that's where I would recommend people to go to. Shalom Center and our programs, Shalom Center and Friends Place, are the two places that are overnight shelters. Friends Place and Shalom's the day center. We work with a lot of seniors, and so and support them both at the overnight shelter and the day center. So that would be my recommendation, at least as far as our programs.
Yeah, and I'd like to add that Friends Place, our overnight shelter, does prioritize people by vulnerability also. So if an elderly person showed up and there were 4 other people waiting for bed and there was only 1 bed open, unless one of those other people was more disabled or more vulnerable, the elderly person would probably be the one approved for the bed.
I did just see, I haven't been able to keep up with the chat live in the moment, but I did happen to just see this one come in that Area 10 has affordable housing lists for elderly individuals. So whoever asked this question might want to check into Area 10 as well. Thank you. Next question, let's see.
There is a group, Hoosier Uplands is working with Milestone Ventures in Bedford to try to launch a new housing project for people who are seniors experiencing homelessness. So it's in its very initial phases. They have to go through the Permanent Supportive Housing Institute before they can even apply for funding. But if anyone stumbles across that project, you might want to show some support for it, because we could definitely use housing that's directed at seniors.
Danielle, is that for Monroe County or is that for
Lawrence
County? Okay.
There is a new, a relatively new apartment building in Ellettsville that's focused on seniors and subsidized housing.
Yeah,
Governor's Park, I think. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, they were a pretty long wait list at this point, but they were great there for a bit as we tried to fill places up.
Yeah, we got all the seniors out of our shelter when that place opened.
Okay, thank you all. If you haven't answered this question already, go ahead. What kind of supportive services do you provide to families?
Do you mean supportive services to people who are families who are homeless, or to families who we are housing?
I'm guessing the second, but the question is, what kind of services provide? What kind of supportive services do you provide to families? That's just the question, but I'm guessing it's maybe the second.
The same supportive services that we provide to all of our residents, except if they need stuff that's related to them being a family, then we help them with that too. Our goal as case managers is to be whatever our residents need. So if their kid needs a ride to school for the next few days because they got in trouble on the bus, we'll help them with that. If they need to get signed up for WIC, we'll help them with that. You know, some of our case managers have been families in need themselves. So they are, you know, aware of the issues and the resources, but whoever our resident is, we try to be whatever they need.
I think what I'm hearing is that you all have really comprehensive care when it comes to people that you're serving, and that people are not just kind of coming in and getting a bed. They're coming in and getting like the full, they're getting everything that they, well, maybe not everything, but they're getting a lot of what's going to help keep them there. Is that what I'm kind of hearing you say?
We try. It would be even better if there were twice as many of us to do the work.
Yeah, yeah. But it's
Yeah.
definitely comprehensive care is what I'm hearing.
I would add individualized care, because no two people, much like no two of us on this call are alike. Everyone's going to have different needs, different challenges, different strengths, different assets that they can draw upon. And so it's our case manager's responsibility. And like Danielle, I wish we had twice as many of them to kind of meet with individuals, find out what those strengths and needs are, and then make a plan for each resident.
Yeah, and the case management is a part of all permanent supportive housing. It goes together. You house them and you work with them to improve what they want to work on.
Thank you. Can you all name the sites that you have that allow children?
All of our sites allow children.
Kinzer Flats does. I don't remember about the other two PSH programs.
The other two would allow it, but I believe it would only be one parent and the minor child, just because of the number of bedrooms in the
They're
unit,
all one bedrooms.
or efficiency apartments.
Yeah.
We generally house our families through scattered sites, so they're not necessarily so we find apartments in the community that fit them, and the same with rapid rehousing. But Friends Place is a shelter for just adults, just so there's clarity. So in terms of the housing programs, we have options for everyone, but Friends Place is a shelter just for adults, and but the day center, Shalom Center, does serve families as well.
Okay, thank you. How prevalent is it that people are not entering into shelter because they are unable to get the necessary documentation for their service animals or emotional support animals? What community resources are available to assist in obtaining this documentation?
I'm not sure if I know how many people are having trouble getting it. It does seem that people are able to get it if they want to. I think a lot of times they go through Centerstone to get it, or through a healthcare provider like HealthNet or something like that. So those are the major probably resources. There might be some others that people know about here on the panel here. But yeah, that's generally how it does it. And it's important to know too that those are service animals are protected by the American with Disabilities Act, and emotional support animals are protected by fair housing law. So apartments, no matter where they are legally required to allow people with service animals or emotional support animals to live there. And that generally applies to shelters too, that it's that certainly service animals, but there's been some ambiguity about whether fair housing applies to overnight shelters. And my understanding is that a correct interpretation of fair housing laws that overnight shelters have to provide space for emotional support animals as well.
And that's true for our shelter. I don't think we can speak to what Wheeler's policy is in regard to animals.
Yeah, I don't know either, but I do know that if someone turns away a service animal or an emotional support animal with documentation for the emotional support animal, service animals, the person just needs to say this is a service animal, that a shelter would be breaking the law if they turn them away.
Okay, thank you. We were talking about collaboration earlier, and someone asked if this collaborative work at all, does this collaborative work at all with the local community health center?
Yes, we have a strong partnership with HealthNet, which used to be Volunteers in Medicine for people that aren't as familiar. They became a federally qualified healthcare center about a year and a half or so ago. So their parameters of who they could work with changed. It used to just be people in a certain income bracket who didn't have insurance. Now they can work with pretty much anybody. And they have a homelessness initiative program where they actually are bringing nurse practitioners out to the camps, into the shelters, they're going to Wheeler on a weekly basis. They're going to Middleway on a weekly basis. And we're currently renovating a room for them at Crawford, and waiting for approval from their regulatory agency to have a once a week, at least, clinic here at Crawford. And their nurse practitioners are a regular nurse practitioner and also a psychiatric nurse practitioner. So HealthNet is making huge strides in getting care to people who are experiencing homelessness and people who have experienced homelessness, including some, psych meds that are really difficult to get to people who refuse to come to Centerstone. So they've just been a major benefit to our community.
That's great. Thank you. Okay. Is there discussion of partnership between city and county to partner with developers to build new housing outside city limits that accept Section 8 housing and would receive funding from grants?
I don't think there's anything specific like that I know of now, but I think that the county has been a great partner. I don't know. I know Penny is on the call. Penny Gibbons is on the call, and she might have more insight into this. But they have provided funding to Heading Home and are at the table. So
I know one of the things that comes up when we're building new permanent supportive housing is they need to be in places that are accessible, that are close to grocery stores, that are close to other services, and that usually have bus service. So that kind of limits where permanent supportive housing could go, unless we can get some of that built as well.
Okay, thank you. My question was related to that. I was wondering if there's any city and county partnerships going on to help, I'm not sure the right word, but inspire or motivate landlords to accept vouchers.
well, I would describe Heading Home to some extent as a city-county partnership with other partners, obviously. But it was the city of Bloomington and the Monroe County government that funded this. And part of our mission is to try to expand the number of landlords that accept housing vouchers. We need to do this in a super collaborative way. And so, I think that's one example. Other than that, I don't know of any different kind of city county collaboration. I guess as one example, the Bloomington Housing Authority has launched a landlord risk mitigation program, basically creating kind of an insurance policy for landlords that if something happens with one of their residents, they can, the landlord can have some recourse in terms of, if there's damage that exceeds the deposit or if there's some rent isn't paid. So that is started as a City of Bloomington program, but we are providing some funding through Heading Home that will allow it to expand to landlords that are outside of the city of Bloomington in Monroe County. So that is another example.
Okay, thank you. I see there was a question about New Hope and Forest. Thanks for answering that question. And I think we're actually have answered all the questions. Is there any? There are a lot of questions that came in, and thank you all for just like being willing to ask all these questions coming in. Did any of you want to maybe part with any closing words, things that you'd like to share with people watching it? Go ahead, Dan.
Did Penny get an opportunity to speak?
She's happy. Yeah, if she wants to speak, she
Okay.
can let me know. I didn't see any raised hands or I didn't get a message, but Penny just said that Monroe County is looking at using some of our ARPA money to help county residents with rehabbing their homes as a way to keep people housed. Great, thank you. There was actually something else that came in. I wanted to just speak in case people are hearing this over cats. Excuse me. IU Health has 2 PSH scattered site programs. Bridges and Housing Links both have some family-sized units as well. So that was regards to family housing. I think, yeah. If anyone else,
there are three, and that's good. There are 3 entities in our community that have permanent supportive housing: Centerstone, Beacon, and IU Health Positive Link. So I'm glad that Cindy chimed in there to add their voice too.
Great.
In Monroe County, outside of Monroe County, there's some more, but 3 in Monroe County.
Okay. So we'll pause on questions now. Thank you so much. If any of the 5 of you want to have any last minute comments or let the public that's going to be watching this on Cats later want to know about, now's the time for that.
I'd personally like to thank the CARES board and Steve Malone for reaching out to this group and asking us to get together to have this conversation in a community setting so that hopefully more information can get out there about the services and the experiences that individuals dealing with homelessness are facing. I think it's not something to shy away from, and I'm proud that generally Bloomington does not do that. So thank you, Steve.
You're welcome, and I really appreciate you all willing to participate in this. I think this has been an absolutely fabulous and very informative session. I will tell you this, I think it's probably the best we've had in years, where our community is concerned as far as our community meeting. So thank you for all your hard work and due diligence as far as serving the community of Monroe County and its members. So thank you very, very much. I really appreciate it. And we as the CARES board really appreciate, I should say this, it should be the CARES board, because the CARES board came up with the idea and we just kind of followed through on it. So.
Thank you for having us today, and thank you for all your great questions.
Yeah, thank you. Look forward to working with you.
I'm going to put my email in the chat again. If people, and I'll say it out loud in a moment. If you have interest in applying for a CARES grant, please email me. If you would like a copy of this recording, please email me. My email address is LL M as in Mary, EUS as in Sam, ER @me.com, and I will get that out to you. If you have suggestions for CARES community meeting topics for the future, I'm really interested in hearing those too. We like to do community meetings twice a year, and we like to address issues that are important in the community as they relate to substance use, prevention, treatment, or justice issues. Anything else you want to say, Steve, before we end today?
You took the words right out of my mouth as far as asking for other topics to discuss here in the community, because we think we have our pulse on them. We don't have our pulse on everything. So anybody that has any suggestions on that, please feel free to send Lisa an email or me an email at smalone@co.monroe.in.us is my email. So please feel free to get with us. And I think Penny has her hand raised for something real quick. I'm not sure, but Penny, far away.
Great. I'm trying to unmute you. Okay, great.
You did, thank you. Well, I also want to remind people that the county has provided additional money to our township trustees to help with rent and utilities, again, to keep people housed. And then both the city and the county have been receiving some opioid settlement monies. And we would welcome suggestions on how to most effectively use that money. We have applied for additional grant money through the state to leverage what we have so far. We'll find out about whether or not any of that is funded May 1st, but there is a lot to do, clearly.
Who would we talk to about the opioid settlement money?
Me? Oh, sorry. I'm one of the commissioners. And so, yeah, you could bring it to us. And then Beverly Calendar Anderson, I think, is the point person right now for the city of Bloomington. Both entities got kind of upfront money, and then it's going to come in dribs and drabs for the next 17 or 18 years. There will be more money coming through, we think, for opioid settlement money as additional entities are basically pushed into settling over the opioid epidemic. So there should be more, but we can't just go out and start a treatment center. There's not enough money for that. And I don't think the county wants to be in the business of running a treatment center anyway, but would certainly welcome input on the best way to use those dollars.
All right, great. Well, thank you, Penny, and thank you, everyone. Thank you particularly to our panelists for your perseverance in answering all of these questions that are coming through from great audience members. All right, and with that, have a great afternoon, everyone, and we'll see you all in the community. Bye for now.